Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the third episode of Uzumaki. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. No point in me bringing it up again and again, and just like every time the further and further along this show goes, I'm just like, it's so weird. Once again, I'm not familiar enough with Junji Ito stuff to be like, once again, this is probably par of for the course of Junji Ito, but it just makes me so curious about the structure of the manga because it feels, I mean, once again, it's 4 episodes, so I didn't know what the like pacing of structuring of this is, and I kept bringing up like the whole like episodical or anthology nature of it, and I'm curious if that's how the manga's structured, where it's like it's one story that you follow it all the way through to its conclusion, then you move on to the next story. I wonder if in the manga, in the anime, they're like weaving them together, trying to create some form of an overarching narrative. Or is it just kind of like, no, the episodes are meant to be a structure of short. I mean, because like we do interweave between different storylines, because like all the stuff at the hospital, we're weaving through the mosquito stuff, which is tied into the pregnant lady stuff, but you also have the stuff with Suichi's mom, Yuki. Like that's a whole separate thing, and we're kind of bouncing back and forth between the pregnant ladies and Suichi's mom. So I'm wondering, like, is Suichi's mom stuff one episode thing, or do they constantly bounce back and forth? That maybe it's not as an anthology styled as I'm thinking it is in the manga. I'm just so curious what the storyline, like how they structure those stories. My understanding, God, I think like Trash Taste talked about in the most recent episode they put out, but it was the whole, they're more familiar with the manga, but I want to say like, they're saying like, right, the anime's so like quickly burning through stuff rather than kind of sitting with, like that's, I guess that's how Junji stuff works. It's like the build up and sitting with it, but this is boom, 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 because they're trying, I mean, I don't know if that was like the directive they were given of you only have 4 episodes, or they just felt like narratively, like, that's why I'm so curious, like, would it be better as like little shorts rather than like full episodes? Like each storyline gets its own like maybe 5 to 10 minute thing or something. That I don't know. Like I said, I don't have the manga in comparison to really know the structuring of the story, or if it's just like the anime is like, yeah, it's faster paced, but it's like, no, the manga is just as like bouncing between storylines like that. Either way, going back to it, you have the hospital situation. Let's start off with Suichi's mom. So Suichi's concern is like, right, my mom is spiraling out, once again, pun intended, because she's trying to avoid all the spirals in her body. And Suichi didn't even think about it until he saw in the doctor's room the anatomy of the body, and noticed like the thing in your ear, what's it, the cochlea, makes it so that you can hear, and it's a spiral. So he was hoping his mom wouldn't see it, but the problem is she starts having nightmares. I mean, first and foremost, there was a giant centipede that was in her ear, and then it morphed into her husband being like, oh, like I was inside your ear, like the spiral that's in your ear. And so she's like, right, do I have a spiral in me? Because she thought she got rid of all of them on her fingers, on her feet, you know, got rid of her hair just to get rid of all the spirals. But the problem is, like, now she's like focused on this, and now it's a situation of, you know, they tried to like hide the fact that the doctor's like, no, you don't have any spirals in your ear. Even took down the anatomy diagram. I'm sure that was Suichi's idea. Maybe the doctor figured out on its own, because they wanted to send her to like a psychiatry facility. I'm sure even if they sent her to that facility outside of town, she'd still be suffering through this. But yeah, the nightmares got worse, and it's like her husband coming to her. It's like, no, like even in the IV bag, the swirl turned into her husband. It's like, oh yeah, there's a spiral in your ear. Oh, I love to crawl into that spiral and become that spiral in your ear, to the point she found scissors. You were hoping that, well, considering she cut off her fingertips and, not fingertips, but her fingerprints and her toe prints, you're just like, you would have thought there'd be no sharp objects. I thought she was have to get creative. It's like, nope, she found a pair of scissors and jammed them in her ear. It seems like his mom died. Like last time we see her bandaged up, but we did see, like, I think that was like a photo of her and Suichi was standing in front of it. So I'm like, I guess she maybe succumbed to her wounds or something like that. Like, because her entire head was bandaged up. So it wasn't probably, she started with stabbing her ear, but maybe she did a lot more damage to the rest of her body. And she's like, yeah, I don't want to turn into a spiral. But then it appears she gets cremated, but maybe she didn't get cremated. Maybe that, because like we do immediately turn to like the smoke in the sky. So it's like, that could just be like, I don't know if that's necessarily like her being cremated, because I'm like, I thought the whole point was we stopped cremating and went back to burying bodies in this town. So that's what I'm not clear on. But I think it might have just been a hard cut to Kirie's dad, like, you know, heating stuff up in his Klein or Klin, or, you know, thing he does with his pottery and stuff. I think it was interesting because it did seem like he wasn't at one point him coming out of the water with like a vase or something, which we know there's nothing but spirals in those waters now. We never got any clarity on the whole Kirie and her brother situation when they fell down the stairs. I guess it's like hey, they fell down the stairs, landed at the bottom of the tower, and didn't get scorched by the flames. Maybe that's once again, the stories just kind of move on, and I don't know if the manga's like that or not. If that's just the anime being like, we don't have time to deal with everything, we're going to try and cram as much of this as we can. I just don't know. So, but anyway, Kirie's in the hospital with her cousin Keiko, but then you hear all about like the mosquitoes, and then there's like a whole bunch of pregnant women that have showed up at the hospital sick. There's like 3 people that died in the hospital because they're like, oh, there's little stab wounds. I'm like, isn't that from the mosquitoes? But it's like, no, we find out all the pregnant ladies kind of go psycho at night and start drilling into people and sucking their blood like vampires. Keiko is the same way because we knew something was happening to her. We just didn't know what. So they're feasting on blood. They're not just after male victims. That one guy gets hypnotized because they make a spiral. They hypnotize him and made him easy prey. Then they jumped on the nurse, tried to do Kirie, but luckily the spray. Which I mean, I love that because it starts off with Shuichi showing up there, being pretty much an insensitive asshole that he's spraying like this bug spray in a hospital, even though like Kirie's over there, Kiko's over there pregnant. It's like, it was very insensitive of him, but it worked out in the end because that being there is what let Kirie escape. But after bug spraying those women, they ran away, and the next day they seem so normal, like everything's fine. Then they are giving birth, and then their babies are talking about going back in the womb, when you're just like, okay, once again, not gonna worry about how weird it is. Just keep it moving, keep it pushing. So it's like the babies want to go back in the womb, and we tie that into like the mushrooms that Kirie was eating at one point in time, but she's like, oh, I don't like them, they taste like blood. Turns out they are placenta that have been basically mushroomed, because for whatever reason, like when the umbilical cords are cut, the babies, like a mushroom forms from it, because it's their way of trying to get back into the womb. They don't want to, they're trying to get back in the womb or stay in the womb because they don't want to come out. So I don't know, because we see that with Kiko later on. She has like her stomach was cut, but like the way it's cut, of like, that's not a C-section. So I'm like, did they have to like, because of the mushroom and all, did they have to cut her open but then had to sew her back up? Just I don't know what to make of that. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of mushrooms growing around, and the women and people are just super into it. So Keiko, they're practically because it was something Shuichi says that ties into all of that, because Shuichi's like, the only mosquitoes that drink blood are the females, and that's usually when they're pregnant with eggs. And what are all these women? They're pregnant, trying to feed on blood. So, and we see Keiko's tongue. She doesn't even need the drill. Her tongue is like a mosquito's tongue, and she just like drains the blood out of the doctor. So, don't know what the aftermath of that is. I don't know if those ladies, now that they've given birth, are going back to normal or not, or what that means. Once again, because we keep it pushing, we move on, and it's just like, yeah, it is what it is. So we have that. We have immediately the typhoon situation going on, which apparently the typhoon is calling out to Kirie because it is obsessed with her. Because I think, because the typhoon thing happens after Shuichi, like, because Kirie's dad kept making like pottery that is like got spirals on it because he was inspired by Shuichi's dad, and he's like, oh yeah, like it's so wonderful, it's so great, and now he's barely eating anything because of that. He's also been like, obviously we've seen as the episodes have gotten more, especially this episode, he looks more and more drained and tired because he's been fighting to fight against the spiral. He's been on edge, and it's driving him insane, just not to the same lengths it drove his mom and dad insane. It's just a different kind of insane, because his dad submitted to the spirals. His mom was he's probably more down the lane of his mom, who, well, he hasn't tilted that way as much, where he's just like so deranged, like the spirals set him in like a panic mode like that. But it's still a thing of he's exhausted because the spirals are everywhere and it's like wearing down on his psyche. But yeah, he ends up hearing his parents' voices from inside of the thing that Kirie's dad used to make the pottery. He smashes it open, and all of a sudden, all these like things come flying out. I guess it's like their spirits were trapped. I guess it's like maybe the thing of like when they're being cremated, like their souls were kind of locked in there. Because he was staring at it, and he's like, "Oh, you're crazy, Suichi," thinking like you're hearing your parents' voices in here. So I don't know if the spirals kind of had their souls trapped or whatever, and what unleashing them did, if it did anything. I mean, it just set that little section like where he does his pottery and stuff on fire. So no more concerns about that element of the spirals controlling him, I guess. But then we have the typhoon situation, which I love the callback to last episode. What was it? Azami? Her friend who was all about the hair. It's like, oh yeah, like look, the news reporter, they're like, oh, look behind you. And her body's still there. I'm like, nobody moved her body? Like, that happened last episode. That was like, she'd been there a while, because considering like her body's almost like mummified. It's like, okay, we just kept that moving. Like, no one bothered getting that body? Okay. Once again, I don't know if that's like a little detail from the manga in that same regard, if that's a one for one, or whether it's just like a wink and nod that the animators decided to include that. I have no idea. But like the typhoon is obsessed with Kirie, which does seem to be this recurring theme, because you had Yamaguchi, who was obsessed with her. You also had, like I said, I think her name was Azami, like the woman who was like, no, because I think Azami's the one that, from the first episode, the friend of hers that had the spiral in her head. I think that was her. But the woman with the hair and everything from last episode, she kind of became upset. It was more about, like, fame and stuff like that, and the attention is what she was seeking. But it also was kind of, like, a little bit, a tangential obsession with Kirie's popularity, I guess you could kind of say in that regard. But now the storm, typhoon, the eye of the storm is, like, above the town, and it's also, like, focus on Kirie, like throwing stuff at her, pulling the tiles down off these buildings and everything. And ultimately, this woman that was outside trying to help gets sucked up in the storm. And I was like, is that just going to kill her? But then her body drops. I'm like, did it? I guess like it kept her, and then it was like, oh, you're not who I wanted, and just spit her out, and she died from the impact. I don't know if she was already dead before she hit the ground, but she was sure as shit dead by the time she did. Either way, but they both get, Kirie and Shuichi make it to the sewer system, but their spirals in the water turns into like a like the typhoon swoops them up, and I'm like, are they dead? But then like they end up like on land, and Kirie's parents came to their rescue. So I'm like, I guess it's like it wanted you, but it didn't want you dead, and maybe that's the only reason why Shuichi is alive, because he was with you as well. So it kind of got a 2-for-1. I don't know how you guys are alive. Maybe we're going to find out you've actually been dead the entire time. Then they had to relocate to a more shabby house because their house got destroyed, but this house is kind of shabby. It's like, yeah, but for whatever reason, it's still standing. Then we see that someone's spying on them. You thought it, I was thinking maybe it had, I wasn't expecting it. What's his, what's the dude's name? Like Waka Bayoshi or something like that. I'm probably butchering it. It's something like that. He's the neighbor that had introduced himself previously to them off screen. And now it's like, hey, oh, the moans you hear? Because Kirie's brother's thinking it's monsters. And he's like, no, it's not monsters. That guy, like the son next door, lives with his mom. It's like there's a chronic illness they have, and he's constantly moaning. But then they hear more moans, and it turns out to be the mother. But she has like these things growing out of her, which I guess like are supposed to be the illness she has. But we actually never get to see what the son looks like. But I can only assume it looks like what Waka Bayoshi or whatever his name is looked like later on. He himself then becomes obsessed with Kirie. He's like, "Oh, you're such a beautiful, strong woman." I'm like, what is this obsession with Kirie all of a sudden? You know? part of me wonders, is it supposed to be some element of, even though her hair's cut and it's not as bad as it was, that on some level that, oh, like people being mesmerized by you is still there to some extent? I'm wondering if that why they also included that lady from last episode who also had the hair situation, because despite her hair being short and cut and not spiraling anymore, there's still some of that residual spiral energy on her, I guess. But Home Dude full turns into a monster. I don't know whether those things are like horns or whatever they are, like callus-shaped horns, like forming out of its body. Tries to go after Kirie. They go outside. The wind, because the typhoon's still going, and it ends up sending a piece of lumber right through his neck. Then there's also the Yamaguchi of it all. Because I was just thinking, I was like, man, we never got back to that end of last episode, that stinger with Yamaguchi still. I'm like, did I watch the stinger of episode 1 then? That's what I'm so curious about. Because I definitely remember the stinger of episode 2 being like Yamaguchi coming back to life. But I don't remember if I watched episode 1's stinger. It might have been the lighthouse stuff, but I don't remember. I thought that was like at the end of the episode. I don't remember if I got past the credits to see like the after credits thing, which what I'm saying is the stinger. But yeah, I was like, oh, we're not ever gonna get to the Yamaguchi stuff. Nope, he comes out too. Like I said, it's just happening all at once of like this obsession with Kirie or being around Kirie. So he starts walking, strips himself of like what he was wearing, and then proceeds to like jump, and his body's falling apart. There's a spring. I'm like, where the fuck did that come from? But Suichi's explanation of, oh, that's a suspension from a car. I'm like, I mean, not like that makes any sense, but I was like, okay, from the weirdness, at least in a weird way, I'm like, okay, that makes sense where the spring, I'm like, why? I was like, did they put a spring inside of his body to put his body back together because it was so mangled, so you couldn't just sew his body back together, use the spring to hold it together in the casket or something? I was like, no, like somehow the spring got mingled into his body. Maybe when they were piecing his body back together or sewing it back together, the spring was inside of his abdomen like that. Have no idea. And so that's where things kind of end on that point. They see the body, some neighbors see that body of Wakayaboshi. I guess I'm definitely butchering his name. That dude, like, with all the stuff growing out of him, dead on top of a roof. And then it's just like, even Kirie's like, at this point, I've just grown numb to this all. Like, it's just, you know, we just all, like, I don't know if once again, it feels like the town has kind of grown numb to it, because it's like, everyone's just staying. Why is there not a mass exodus? Like, do people like, oh, there's some weird stuff happening in town. Oh, well. Like, why is it Kirie, like, Suichi wanted to leave in him first? I mean, your mom, the way it seems like in the episode, maybe I'm misinterpreting it, but it's saying like your mom is dead, right? But maybe that's not what that scene was supposed to represent. Like I thought that was her picture, but maybe it was some other character. But especially like after they show that picture and then like Suichi's reaction to it, like right after, like you see the bandaged, like Yuki's like bandaged head. So I'm like, it has to be that she died. So it's like the only thing keeping him in his town is Kirie, and I'm sure doesn't want to leave her family behind, but like, why is no one leaving? And maybe there's something to that where it's like the spiral is drawing you in to make you forget everything, and just kind of like, yeah, it's persistent, but you can't bring yourself to actually leave because the spiral is to bring you closer and closer to the center, and it won't let you escape. That's the closest explanation I can get to all of this. It's going to be interesting to see. The next episode is the final episode, so what crazy shit's going to happen there, what the end result's going to be. Is everyone going to be dead in the entire town? Will Suichi and Kirie survived? Maybe, maybe not. I'm leaning more so into no, because they seem to be our main through line throughout all these stories to some extent. I wonder, will we get any closure on some of these stories that have been kind of left open-ended, like the Keiko stuff? Like, will we find out what happened to her and the other ladies in that hospital? All we know is like when Kirie got out of the hospital, she was like, let's go back home. Let's get the fuck out of this hospital and away from here. So, but yeah, that's really all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.